I want to give you an update on a couple of things that I did in the interim while we were not filming, but I'll go over everything so you'll be able to see exactly what I did. So I'm going to remove a few things. VTX. We'll leave the receiver in. Okay, so what I've done here is I've installed the servos. We did the pockets previously. All I did was run the wires in and glue them in. And the important part that I do when I'm putting my servos in is I only put glue on the vertical edge, and the vertical edge. I don't put glue underneath it because I want to be able to remove the servos in the event that something goes wrong with one of these. I can just run a X-Acto knife or a hobby knife inside of here and be able to pop the servo right out without damaging the foam or anything around it. So servos are glued in. I've gone ahead and I've cut 2 additional pockets, one for the receiver, which is installed right now, and the VTX that's going to be installed here in the near future. Additionally, because I needed to have stuff sit and wasn't vitally important that I actually show you, but I've gone ahead and I've put on the motor mount. And the way that I did that was, previously I had shown you that when I laminated, I had put a layer of glue underneath the laminate, then I laminated it, and now I've gone and I've taken my Dremel with just a sanding wheel, and I've gone very lightly and sanded the laminate to roughen it up, and then I sanded the opposite side of this motor mount as well, the aluminum, to make it rough. Once it's rough, now I can go ahead and do my glue on my motor mount and know that it's going to make a nice, even, nice, good, solid seal. And it's on there really good now. Additionally, I've gone ahead and put in our battery bottom plate as well. So again, I took the Dremel and I sanded the edges all around on both the laminate and the pocket on the inside, as well as the ABS plastic that I put on here. So I've done all that and just used welders and glued it in place. And as you can see, it comes out really nice. So I'll be able to put some Velcro in here and mount our battery. And the motor mount's all done, so the motor can get mounted in at the time that we choose to do that. Now, I want to go over one thing that I do, because you see that the servos are in. Do not make the mistake of mounting your servos in and then figuring out how you're going to put on your servo arms. That can be very, very difficult. So what I always do is, before I glue the servos in, I bind up my receiver to my radio, and then I center up, put all the trims to center, all the sub trims to center, and I make sure that the servos are centered out. And then I put on the servo horns as close to center as possible. They're not going to be exact, but I want them as close as possible. And then at that point, I can go ahead and glue in my servos so they're in their permanent place. I don't have to change anything. Any adjustments I need to do, I'll do in my transmitter via sub trim in order to get the servos centered. So when we go to put our control links on, we'll be able to choose the right length and be able to do those fine-tuning issues. So in order to do, because we're going to be doing a wrap on this, both top and bottom, I needed to think ahead several steps. So we'll be going over a couple of things now that I need to do prior to putting the wrap on. One of which is I needed to get this receiver in. I needed to have all the servos in place. I needed to have all the wires done. I took the liberty of actually shortening this servo wire and using a crimp tool and some extra pins and shortening the length of this one. This one is full length and actually reaches. This one I had to shorten up because I didn't want to bundle a whole bunch of wire in here. Additionally, I needed to go ahead and get started on doing the ESC. And what you see here is the ESC as well as an RROSD. And just to take a minute to go over this, I'm using a Cobra 60 amp ESC, and the RROSD is actually very unique. I love these things because it gives me nice basic battery information on my screen when I look at my OSD as I'm flying. So it'll tell me my milliamps used, it'll tell me my instantaneous current so I can see what my current draw is, and that's vital when it comes to, one, choosing the right ESC, as well as also what prop I should be using, because if I'm drawing too much current for the motor, I can burn up the motor. If I'm drawing too much current, I can put the ESC into thermal overload and get shut down. So it helps me choose which prop is best for my entire setup. So it has the timer on there. You can put RSSI up on your screen. It's basic information, but it's really, really good. The board only costs $30 too, so it's a fantastic piece that you can put on virtually any wing. I even have one on my Apex. It fits on there nicely. It's the size of a regular mini quad flight control board, so it can fit on virtually anything. The connections that we have here is, I have one connection here that's for my camera, and I have another connection here that's for my VTX, and I'll put another connector on here in time. I needed to solder in the motor, so it's a simple positive side, negative side, and later on I'll go in and I'll solder on our main battery leads that go to these two connections here. Just a plus and minus, easy to do, and this entire setup will just drop right in my pocket very nicely. This will all drop in here. We'll be able to make a little pocket right back here to go through for our camera. It'll connect right up, and our VTX will be here. That'll connect right up. And with our hatch door, this will all get covered up nice and neat. It's going to be a very, very nice and clean setup. So once I have these items in place, I can run the wrap along this whole thing, only cut out for our hatch door. We'll cut out for our VTX to allow some air to get in there. The receiver, once it's bound, we don't have to worry about that. This entire thing will be nice and covered with our wrap, so it'll come out very, very nice. So what I want to do additionally at this point is I need to get the Elevons on. I've already gone and laminated the Elevons, and just to give you a look at how I typically do these, I'll cut 2 sheets of laminate. I'll cut 2 strips, one for the top, one for the bottom, and I will laminate. Typically I'll laminate on the bottom, cover that part, trim at my edges, then I'll flip it over and laminate the top part, just regular laminate technique, and then I'll leave a little overlap so I can fold over and fold over on all the sides, and we have a nice clean Elevon, and I do it for both of them. But at this point we're going to actually add these on to our wing, and I have a little technique that I use just using laminate. I don't use tape. I don't do a little, the little strips of things. I usually use a strip. So what I do is I cut 1.5 inch strips of laminate, and we'll be putting these on, and I'll show you my technique. Let me just heat up the iron. Okay, we're back. So I'm going to show you the BB Tech Elevon install. It's pretty basic, but some guys will do it a little bit different, but this is the way I found best that works for me, and it makes for a really nice solid Elevon that hinges really nice. Again, I've cut 1.5 inch strips I usually will use nothing less than 3 millimeter. This is 3 mil. I like to use 3 mil, more than 5 mil. I've even tried 1.7 millimeter, but that is too thin to do Elevons with. It will delaminate. So 3 mil works best because 1, it keeps it light. 2, it's a lot more flexible than 5 mil, and it's just the right kind of stuff to do it with. So what I do is I take an Elevon, and I flip it over to the back side, the bottom side of it. And what I'll do is I'll hold in place this laminate. And I'll look down the edge. I can see through it. I'll look down to where I have about a little bit less than, I'll put the Elevon, this line on the Elevon, the top edge. I'll put that somewhere close to the center of the width of it. Doesn't have to be exactly in the center. I just get it close with a little bit of overlap on both sides because that part will be trimmed off. And then I just hold it in place. And what I'm going to do is hold it, and I'm going to take my iron and I'm just going to tack it in place in one spot. Then I'm going to pull it, just light little pull, and tack it in a couple more places along the way, just so I can keep it in place. All right. Now, typically I'll run the iron a little bit cooler than what I will when I'm laminating the wing, because Elevons don't need nearly the amount of heat that you use on the regular wing itself. If you have elevated heat like what you would do when you're doing foam and lam, this will bubble up and start to look pretty crappy. So I usually will turn the iron down, instead of having it like 325 or so, I'll usually turn the iron down to like 275. And just so I don't need that much heat. So now I'll just run this along, run this laminate over. And again, I like to do the little circles and fold it all over so it comes out nice and even, takes any bubbles out. Kind of works towards the edge as you do this. So this is my prep. I'll just prep both of them. And this is the only side that I do first. Right after this, we're going to put them on the wing. And then we'll do the other side. And I want to make sure that I don't put it on the wrong side. I don't want to put it like that on the top side, the flat side. I want to put it on this side, the bottom side. And I need to have the laminate longer on the top side than on the bottom side. I'm trying to line it up somewhere right near the center, or close to the center. Doesn't have to be exact. Then again, I'm going to tack it in place in one spot. That way it stays there. And then I can, again, line it up and tack it in a couple places along the length of it so that it's in place. Then we'll just go along and roll it on. All right, here we go. So how I'll do this is I'll take the Elevon based on the side that I'm using, and what I want to do is I want to lay it upside down on the wing just like this. All right. Now it's important to locate it right to left as you need it, so that when it hinges back, it's going to be lined up with this edge minus a little gap, or actually you can line that one up as close as you want. Get this one right on the edge. This one you'll have a little bit of a gap so that, again, when you have the winglet on, it won't rub up against the winglet. All right, so we're going to want to hold this in place as we're using the iron. This is, like I said, you're going to wish you had 3 hands, but we don't. So I'm going to, again, I'm going to pinch it to where I can feel with my thumb that it's right in line with the rear edge of the foam. I'm going to tack it in place, just to hold it in place. Hold it in place somewhere in the middle, tack it in place. And out at the end. Hold it in place. You don't want to just run your iron down, because It's foam. It's not going to be a perfectly straight edge. And it's wood. It's not going to be exactly straight. So I like to hold it and pinch it up against the edge and then put my laminate. That way everything kind of lines up and pulls it all together. So at this point, now I can just go ahead and iron on just as I normally would onto the foam. And then this excess, we'll just fold this over. And you might have to leave this, you might have to do this a little bit longer than normal because again, we have a little bit cooler iron than we normally would use. But that's what we're looking for, is that kind of edge. All right. So now, there's your Elevon on, but now we just need to put the top strip on. All right. So again, this is an even trickier part. So now we're going to do the top. Again, I take one of our 1.5 inch strips and we're going to put it on this side. But we don't just put it on a flat Elevon. We actually have to flex the Elevon out of the way. We have to actually go into what we would consider full deflection. And we're going to iron it on such that it's like this. But it's very hard to hold it in place like this right off the bat. So we need to tack this in place first. And you can choose to do it either on the wing or on the Elevon. I'm actually going to tack it in place on the wing, on the foam itself. So I'll just get this strip over here, trying not to touch the, well actually you know what, I'm going to put it on the Elevon because I can get to that easier. So just line it up so it's evenly on both sides. And we're going to tack it in place. And then we're going to pull again, and we're going to tack it in a couple spots along the way. And then, let me hold this. I don't want to iron on any of this part that's loose here. I just want to iron onto the Elevon. Make sure that that's good before I do anything else. And really, I want to just go and try to do just the edge. I can go back and do the rest of it later, but I want to make sure the entire strip is actually ironed. Again, this is kind of tricky. So just take your time and try to be as precise as possible. You just don't want to touch the foam side, otherwise you'll ruin your hinge. All right, so we'll get it tacked on here. This works out the best for me. I can actually clamp it with my legs, hold it in place. Now, this part is very important because as you bend this Elevon back, there's a point at which if you go too far, the gap between the Elevon and the wing itself will start to increase. That's where the point that you've gone too far. And the wing is never going to see that much deflection in the control surface. You're only going to be seeing typically around here. You know, throw is going to be somewhere like this. Wings have very short throw. So I just want to be able to get it to where, and I'm pressing inward. I'm pressing in as I hold this in place. All right, and I'm folding it back to where I have a nice tight gap. Now, mind you, once I'm done, this gap will loosen up. But you don't want it real loose. That's why you have to fold it over like this. And again, you're going to tack it in place to hold it in place. You're going to try to maintain that and work your way down the wing. And we're just going to do a tack. And I'm pressing inward, and I'm going to do a tack. And let's do the outside edge and do a tack. Now that I have that, I can let it go. Now I can just go back and go over all the edge because everything's being held in place now. I can just go down and do all my ironing like this. and finish off this entire seam. And when I'm done, I'll show you what the gap looks like. All right, there we go. Now you have a nice small little gap. That's your hinge. And there you go. See, it's nice and loose. It can flex down, it can flex up. No issues. Now we'll just trim off the edges and you'll be good to go. You can even go back and do the back side now. And hopefully the two pieces of laminate in the center kind of touch each other and adhere to themselves right in that gap. Then you'll have a really nice hinge there. Elevons line up on both inner edges nicely. That's just what we're looking for. Came out perfect. And one way you know that you got the laminate ironed on really good is doesn't make any noise. Sometimes you'll hear a little crinkle crinkle. That little crinkle crinkle tells you didn't get the laminate ironed on real good. There's a little pocket somewhere. Okay, and we're back. And this will be a little bit of a reveal, but this is our wrap. This is what we're going to be placing on the bottom of the wing. Nice little pre-printed wrap done by NinjaWraps. We're going to actually put this on just as you would on a car finish. It's a vinyl wrap with our printed logo and name of the wing, and in the background you're going to see, since it's called the Villain, we've actually got some villains printed in here. The top side actually has them in full color, so you'll see that later, but just wanted to show you how we're going to apply this. We have a little bit of an overlap, as you can see, a little bit overlap on the front edge because that's going to get wrapped over, and then the top part will get wrapped around it as well and seal that whole thing off. So I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to trim this up some so I can get it cut to where I need it to be. Okay, now what you're going to see is I have these lines here showing the sides where the Elevon, or where the winglets go. I actually need to cut in probably about 1/4 inch or so inside of where that line is, because I need to leave enough gap that when I glue on my Elevon, my winglet, I like to run a bead of glue right along the edge of it to seal it off the whole way around. And I don't want to glue to this wrap. I actually want to have a little bit of a space, so I'm going to cut in just a little bit inside of that just to make sure I give enough space for my winglet. Okay, so we're back and we're going to be doing our vinyl wrap actually on the bottom. What I've done is I've just taken a simple pillow so I have something to actually prop this on and get a little bit higher so I can work with this. We're actually going to peel off a portion of it and we're going to start from the center and work our way out. I'm going to be using just a piece of coroplast with one of the flutes cut and a little bit longer. This is what I'm going to use as my squeegee to actually like press and get all the bubbling out of this. And I'll need to actually do a little cut around the motor mount. So that's where we're going to apply this first off, and then we'll trim and be able to lay everything inside of there. Have to be very delicate though, not to cut into the foam or the laminate, but that shouldn't be a big deal. I'm just going to fold that over on the other side, trying not to touch this. We're trying to touch it as little as possible. All right. So, where I'm going to, and mind you, because this is wrap, it can be removed. So I'm going to be fitting it in place, and I will periodically be lifting and reapplying as I see fit. And what I'm lining up here is one of the rear edges so I can get an orientation. And I'm just going to let this dry. All right. Now that I have it generally straight, I want to get this motor mount area first. So I need to rub in this area, get any bubbles out. And then I'm going to take my hobby knife and I'm going to trace around it, because I can see the outline of it right here. Just want to be delicate. Okay, so we're back. As you can see, I've trimmed out around the motor mount, finished that trim out, and now I can actually take my squeegee, since I know everything is where it's supposed to be, and I can use this to rub out any bubbles or little imperfections that I see here and get this all smoothed on here just like I want it. So just working it in place, getting all the little places that I need to. And just be careful. Try to do this without getting folds in it. I see a little ripple right here, so I'm actually going to pull back to get this part out. Again, it's nice that you can remove this and you can handle little areas like that. And now that it's in place, I know that once I get that out, I can actually work everything without having to worry about it going crooked or anything like that. Good. Okay, good. So we've met the rear edge, nice and neat. So we still have our hinge in place. Got good coverage. I have a little gap on the edge so that I can do my glue. That came out good. So now I can go ahead and start working the other areas. And this side should be a bit easier to apply as I just pull away this backing, and I can work my way out as I remove the backing. Okay. All right, so we've got our entire covering on here and looks good. So now I can just roll the edges. So what I'm going to do is flip it over, and I'm going to trim this in the front because we're going to need to fold this back in separate pieces. And this will need to be at an angle.